welcome to this is ChipCon, and welcome to the Otherworldly, the Changing Times, Changing World show. We're coming up on the conference, so it's coming up soon. Excitement. If you haven't decided to come yet, let's try and get you to do. And if not, remember, we have a virtual track. Tonight, my guest on Otherworldly is Raven, Raven Kaldera, who is a shaman and a lot of other things. I tend to think of him as shaman because he's the old school kind that the gods grabbed him and shook him by the scruff of his neck and waited to see if he was going to survive. And then now he can go to the other world and work with energy and do all kinds of things like that. One of his many, many books, he's also an author, is the Ethical Psychic Vampire. So no, we're not going to be talking blood drinking. Tonight we're talking about sucking the life out of situations and people. And Raven has written a book on it, The Ethical Silent Vampire. I think that is in the chat.
Yep, it is.
We'll put it in at the end in case that doesn't come through.
Yeah,
because it's a good book. I mean, you'd have to drop a chunk of change, which would not be a bad thing if you wanted all of Raven's books. But it would be a cool thing to. Raven knows a lot of stuff, and tonight he's going to be talking about psychic. Energy. Which do you prefer, it, Raven? Psychic vampire?
Sure.
Okay. Anyway, so take it away, Raven.
Okay, so yes, as Chipicon said, I'm a Northern tradition shaman, which means I practice the shamanism of Northern Europe, and I'm also an astrologer and a homesteader, and I've been a pagan. I'm in my 50s now, and I've been a pagan since I was probably 13 or 14. So it's been quite a while, and I'm a polytheist, and I belong to a death goddess. And I'm also a psychic vampire. Hi, my name is Raven Kaldera. I'm a psychic vampire. What does that mean? That means that I do feed on people's life force. I do it consensually with informed consent only. That's my particular code, and I have a number of people who are in my life, who are awesome people in my life, who will willingly give this to me, because rather than going around stealing it, because banks always have more money than thieves. I find. But this I think the first time when I really understood this is something that runs in my family, and I'll talk about the different kinds of psychic vampires in a minute. This is something that runs in my family, and the first time that I ever got told I was a psychic vampire, I was 14 years old, and I got recruited into a British traditional Wiccan coven. That would not happen today, because of without parental permission, I should say. It was under the table. That would not happen today because everybody's too worried about being sued. I was very glad that it happened, because they did a lot of they noted me as a sort of energy using loose cannon. At the time, I was already doing some not too ethical magic and things like that, because I was a teenager, and teenagers do dumb stuff, especially when you've got nothing but fiction to work with, right? And so they taught me what to do and what not to do. But then when I went to my first cone of power, they raised it and they said, "What the hell happened? Where'd it go?" And I was there with an enormous grin on my face saying, "That felt wonderful." And they said, "You ate it." And that's not okay. Don't do that. And I said, "I what?" I mean, I literally did not know what was going on, because you're not taught these things as a child, and there's no language, there's no easy concept, and they weren't sure what to do with me except saying, "Don't do that." And later I moved on to other groups and so forth, and later I would read about psychic vampires in New Age literature and so forth, and it was always, "Oh, those awful people over there." There was never anything positive. There was never any, except for like, they must be healed to make them stop and all this. There was nothing really practical about it. So I went on my way, and I talked to people that I ran into people who knew they were psychic vampires and used that. And some of them were fairly unpleasant people, and some of them were not. And from comparing notes and also from experimenting myself and also from working with spirits who were very clear about what was going on and what I should and shouldn't do, I learned a lot about it. And on my when I was working towards research for researching for the ethical psychic vampire, that was 2 or 3 years of research, talking to folks who were admitted psychic vampires, saying, well, what's your experience of it? How do you handle it? Where do you get your energy? What does it feel like? What are your partners, your donors, whatever? How does this all work for you? What do you do with it? And I got a variety of different voices, and a lot of it began to a lot of what we were experiencing was very similar, and it began to congeal. This is what I learned from talking to probably more psychic vampires, more aware, I should say, aware psychic vampires, and since then some unaware psychic vampires whom I've taught to be aware. But I probably talked to more of these folks than nearly anyone. So what I've learned is, number one, this is a psychic gift like any other psychic gift. It is not about being broken. It is about having a particular gift that needs acknowledgement and training. Many psychic gifts that we're born with, they run in families, and they can mess you up if you don't have acknowledgement and training, if you have no idea what's going on or why different things are happening to you. Somebody puts in like being an empath. Yes, empaths can run into all kinds of problems, because they don't know what's going on. Why do I do this? What is this? Why is this happening to me? If you have no language and no concept of this, nothing to hang it on, that's crazy making. Having a psychic gift and having nothing to hang it on, it's crazy making. And also, many of them need training. Many gifts need somebody to say, okay, so this is problematic. You're doing this thing, and it could be a really good thing, but you need to get it under control. You need to not be a loose cannon. And being a psychic vampire is something that needs to be trained. I've learned to use it for good. Over the many decades of my life, I've learned that I can pull a lot of stuff out of people that they don't need. I've used it for healing all the time. Obviously consensually, because people come to me for that, and I'll say, and I will ask permission. I can take some of that. I can take the edge off of that. It won't fix it, but it will take the edge off. Would you like me to do that? And that's very useful for them, and it's useful for me. I also learned that psychic vampirism comes in 2 forms. I use the terms primary and secondary. That is not like a coolness meter or anything like that. That is born that way, got that way. Primary psychic vampirism, like many other gifts, empathy, telepathy, animal empathy, all kinds of stuff, it's a variety of many psychic gifts. They run in families. Sometimes they skip generations. Sometimes you get throwbacks who are particularly strong, but they do seem to be genetic, and they do run in families. And it does run in my family. My mother was one. My grandmother was one. My daughter was one. And since we were aware of it, we were able to track that while she was still in the womb. And then as a young child, she was trained in how to use it, and how to use it ethically, and how to use it effectively. And by the time she was 8 years old, she was, I remember she came home from a friend's house, and she was very proud of herself because her friends, her little friends, older teenage siblings and sibling friends, were out of money for cigarettes and all having nicotine fits. And she asked if she could take some of the awful craving away for a little while. It's not a permanent thing, but it's a temporary thing. And they said, well, okay, I guess so. And she did. They're like, whoa, that's really cool. And she came home and she's, yay. I took away something people didn't need. And again, it's a temporary situation. But that's the born that way kind. That's the primary vampire kind. And we note that primary vampires, they come in different stripes, different forms, and just within that category, but they all seem, I'm a primary vampire. What we seem to be drawn to is anger, fear, and pain. And I, while I certainly cannot eat and transmute everything in the world, and I've even had the goddess of healing shake her finger at me and say, "You can't eat everything. You got to be careful." I am very good. Where someone who is a natural healer or a receptive empath, they would take those things into themselves and they would get sick. It would mess them up. Primary vampires are made energetically. We're made to clean that. So if I pull that in, if I pull in somebody's really, the energy of someone's stress, I will not get stressed. I will be able to transmute that. Now, I can get overloaded, and there are some things that are like not human stuff, but like ugly stains that have built up that are more than I can handle, in which case there's other things one can do with them. But if it's just a human problem, a human like temporary emotion or temporary stress or temporary pain, something, I can do a lot for that. I can take that into myself and transmute it, and I get fed. And so to me, what this says is that primary vampires are the vultures of the ecosystem. Something ecosystems have vultures, carrion beetles, they have scavengers, they have creatures that eat. Many of the canids are like this too, creatures that eat the garbage. If you don't have the garbage eaters in your ecosystem, the garbage piles up. Every ecosystem, when you look at it, catfish, whatever, there's somebody who eats the scum. There's something in there that lives on that can actually eat the mess. And if you've ever been around vultures, yeah, they're stinky, and no, they can't eat fresh food. They need to have it. It needs to be pretty high before they can digest it. But they have an important part in that ecosystem. Something has to eat the roadkill. And so to me, that is what primary vampires are. We are the carrion eaters of the ecosystem. And that is why my name is Raven. It's not that it's a cool pagan name. It means garbage eater, because that's what they are. Ravens are scavengers, and they do eat rot. And that's part of what I do is I think of myself as sort of a janitor in that way. I'm a sacred janitor. I clean up mess, and I clean up people's difficult things, people's ugly, icky stuff. That's part of what I work with and part of what I do. The other kind of psychic vampire, the secondary vampires, they didn't start out that way. Generally, what they started out as is a child with a strong energy sensing and energy moving gift, which is, and the idea is the gift of sensing energy and moving energy. All primary vampires kind of automatically have that, but some people just have that gift. It too may run in families or whatever, but they either had, what I find is they either had an extremely dysfunctional childhood where there was a lot of problems, and they were often very exhausted from that, or they had some kind of medical condition. I've met a lot of secondary vampires who had serious medical conditions in childhood. Childhood and adolescence, they were in out of the hospital a lot. They were sick a lot. There were ongoing chronic health issues from a very young age. So they never really were a healthy child in that sense. And on somehow or other, they learned to reach out to the people around them and pull in order to survive. So it's kind of like the difference between being a diabetic and being an addict in that sense, but in the primary vampires, we need that. If we don't get that, I mean, first of all, nobody would do that if nobody would go after that stuff if they didn't need it. And so we are made so that we need it. So we need to find ways to get it. Also, both types like sex a lot. I think that's just across the board. We both like sex. But the secondary vampires tend to go after the positive emotions. They want approval. They want positive attention. They want smiles. They want happiness. Many of them, one of the most healthy ways of going about getting that is becoming a performer. I met a lot of secondary vampires who are performers, because here I get applause. I get a whole room full of applause. Not great. So you can basically see the differences between, okay, you have somebody who feeds on energy. Do they feed on the more negative energy, or do they feed on the more positive energy? And there's some energies like going to a concert where everything's very loud and wild and everything. That's like generally that'll feed a lot of people. That's kind of okay, I can just sort of ambiently pull off the air here. But if I'm feeding from a person, so you've got your two kinds here. The vast majority of psychic vampires do not know what they are doing. No one has ever talked to them about this. No one has ever told them. They are completely unconscious of it. They're doing it unconsciously. They don't intend to do it. They may not know why they're doing this. And this is, I wish there was something we could do about this except put it out there. And the more we buy into the whole, oh, those are those bad, awful people over there, the less we are able to help, the less we are able to let someone know actually what's going on, what's happening here. And the more we are just, because they're not going to buy that. That's just, first of all, it's othering. And secondly, if you are an unconscious psychic vampire, you're not going to buy that. You're going to read that and go, oh, that's describing some horrible person. I'm not a horrible person. And so I really encourage people to take this information and put it out there for real. Like, this is a gift that needs some discipline and training and work, and it can be really used for positive things. But it's not just those awful people over there, even though some psychic vampires are kind of awful people. There's the occasional primary vampire who's not a very nice person. Also, I want to make it super clear that the majority of people out there who annoy you, who have poor social skills, those sorts of people who are like, oh God, I get tired being around that person, most of them are not psychic vampires, okay? Most of them are just people who are annoying or have poor social skills, okay, or are needy and want attention, and that can be exhausting. But the difference is, I make it a difference. I make a distinction between vampires and exhausting people. Vampires, when you lose energy being around them, and that energy goes into them. Exhausting people, you lose energy around them, and the energy just goes. It just goes into the air. It goes away. Okay, they don't actually get any of it psychically. Now they might be, if they're needy and they really want attention and approval, they might be being fed emotionally, but they're not actually taking your life force. Your life force is just being scattered, being used up. It's being used up and burnt by having to deal with them. But they are not actually taking the energy from you. And that's a huge distinction. Psychic vampirism is actually real psychic vampirism, fairly rare. Actually fairly rare. Okay? So I don't like it when someone messes those categories up and says that anyone that I happen to not like being around must be a psychic vampire. No. Okay, no. I've also seen throwback some seltzer. I've also seen some kind of awful things go down when people go around paranoidly accusing other people of attacking them psychically, when that's not what's going on. Most people are not going to be doing that to you. In most cases, if something's going wrong, look for a more mundane explanation first before you immediately start pointing fingers at random people around the room and claiming that they are attacking you psychically and feeding on you. So yeah, just be careful with that. Jane, I'll get you in just a second. I just want to relate. I was at a gathering, and there were two other psychic vampires in the room besides myself, and one of them was one of my students that I was training, and then there was another person. We were all in a class, somebody was giving the class, and all of a sudden this other person collapses on the floor and claims that she is being psychically attacked by my student, and my student and her had 3 shamans sitting between them. If anything had happened, we would have noticed. And the 3 of us, I said, I don't see anything. I didn't feel anything. No, nothing happened. would have had to have been something stretched across. You don't just like magically appear, you stretch out a piece of yourself and pull. That didn't happen. And all three of us were like, no, we didn't see it. No. Later, but it made a huge blow up. It was all over the gathering. People were walking up to my student and saying, that's horrible. How could you do that? And my student's like, what? I didn't, I didn't do anything. I don't know what you're talking about. And later, like after a week later, the person who had the breakdown did confess that actually she'd forgotten to eat lunch and it was a low blood sugar problem. And her blood sugar had collapsed. So please be careful around who you point to and accuse. Yes, Jane, you want to unmute and say something?
Okay. A long time ago at a Norse working, we were working on blasting out sickness from a person. Mm-hmm. He had pneumonia. And so we had this big ring going around and sending it down. And there was a lady who said, oh, well, I'm a medical professional and I can help guide it. Turns out she had almost no training, and she was supposed to focus it down the line because we had backstop to soak it up. But she took it all, maybe like she may have been an involuntary primary, and she flipped off the guy's chest and went into a grand mal seizure. And we had to really work with her. And so she realized, but it was a day or two, that we had to really work with her. And she believed that, yes, things like this happen. But this was somebody who just discovered it.
Yes, just because you are a medical professional does not mean that you are a spiritual professional or a psychic professional. She
thought she was.
Yeah, well,
she had a class in it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
not get on that soapbox.
Griffin?
But it is.
Yeah,
I've got a seizure condition, and I have had problems with like minor seizures when I've been overloaded, when I got too greedy, or was in a situation where I could absolutely just chug it, and I had to learn I got to back off, because there's a point at which it's going to overload the circuits of my meat brain, and this is just too much.
Because we'll have a grounding thing. We'll have a grounding thing before the Norse working, but it's high energy. And I hope, Raven, that you'll be able to be there, because we could use your talents and skills. Over.
Examples of overloading. There's a couple of examples of overloading. Was my wife organized I was at a pagan gathering for my birthday. My wife organized a birthday party in which she got 8 Reiki practitioners to come in, turn on the faucet, and all pour into me at once as a gift. That was like it was the psychic equivalent of taking like one of those giant jugs and like chugging without taking a breath as hard and fast as you can. And I did have a bit of a seizure afterwards, after they left, because it was just too much. That was a good lesson. Another one, I did not have a seizure because I pulled back before I could have one, but I grounded at Stonehenge. I got a special ticket, and we got into the actual, the guy's like, I don't know why they put it here. And I'm like, I do. It's a snowflake of ley lines there, like 6 to 7 if you count the one that branches, and that was like chugging a giant thing of alcohol, like white lightning without. And I was like, okay, just a little, but you can overload. Anyway, and positive also, secondary vampires can hurt themselves by trying to pull negative stuff, because they have no more innate ability to automatically cleanse it than does anybody else. And so that can be something that they have to be careful of. So there are now when it comes to difficult unconscious people on both sides, generally with secondary vampires, the difficult unconscious ones are going to be the needy. I want attention. I want attention. I want approval. I want you to validation. I want lots and lots of this. Tell me I'm great. Da 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 da. That kind of thing. They tend to go in that direction. Primary vampires, when they are unconscious and in many cases unethical, they tend towards let's you and him fight. I'll stir things up between two other people so I can sit back and feed off their arguments. So the ones who are like shit stirrers, they tend to be shit stirrers. And no, you can't feed over the internet. I'm sorry. There are people who claim they can. I am extremely skeptical that stirring up fights on the internet is going to get you anything. I call that the catnip response. You've done it so many times in just like a cat will, when the catnip's all out of their ball, just because it smells like catnip, they'll keep playing with the ball and get kind of a contact high. It's like you've done this so many times in real life that this situation feels like you ought to be getting something, I think. Let's see. Griffin Brook has a question.
Yeah, well, I have a thought. One of my areas of special interest, and Lord knows why it turned into a special interest, but when I was trained as a home health aide, I took a specialty in mental health, and they taught me how to recognize a psychopath because we were taught to avoid potentially dangerous clients. And I've spent some time studying psychopathy, and they talk about the iron triangle of narcissism, Machiavellianism, and so forth.
Yeah.
And I realize now you've now explained yourself well enough for me to wonder what percentage of these people are conscious or unconscious primaries that feed on something they stir up in the people they gather around them. Because I know the Machiavellian is out after power. I'm not necessarily certain they would be psychic vampires, although possibly every toxic boss in the world might be one.
No.
Because they but I would be curious about your thoughts on that and clarifications about whether you might find vampires in any of those groups.
Having known an awful lot of psychic vampires, I do not think that psychopathy is any more common than in any other group. Most of the ones I know tend more towards the clueless and low social skills than the psychopathic. I do not believe that I am psychopathic. I mean, I'm not a mental health practitioner, but professional, but my therapist assures me I'm not. I think there's the issue there. I mean, okay, first of all, I want to say straight up, if you're interested in that sort of thing, you probably have read some of the neurobiology of it, but they now think there's a particular, Dr. James Fallon's three-legged stool about if you reading the Psychopath Within, if you want to, or Sociopath Within, I forget what it is. Really, really good book, really excellent book about that. That it's a brain thing. This is a brain thing, and for that to really happen, there has to be a specific type of brain that you're born with, and early lesions, late gestation or early infant lesions, and a bad upbringing. And if you only have 2 out of 3, then you might be mildly narcissistic, but you're not going to be a full psychopath. It's the all threes that have that. I haven't noticed. I mean, okay, there probably are some, but there probably are some in any.
Right. So there's
I would say that someone who has psychic vampirism and has that kind of whatever, that kind of personality, that kind of brain, probably does a lot more damage than like your Aunt May, who's just kind of annoying. They're probably more high ticket, more high profile, and they probably are more interested in making a big deal of it and getting a lot more power. I don't know that the average psychic vampire is terribly interested in getting a huge amount of power beyond what is necessary to eat. It is difficult. There's the issue that, number one, if you need other human beings, you can't just lock yourself in a room. I'm an introvert. I would like to lock myself in a room and not be around human beings for a year sometimes. I can't do that. If I want to be healthy, I need to go out and I need to have relationships and I need to treat these people well so that they will feed me. So there's in order to survive, I need to have a lot of people around me and I need to get them to give me this. And that's hard. That's a difficult thing. And then there's also the issue of if you grow up as a child and you, if you're a primary psychic vampire, your relationship with family dysfunction is very difficult because on the one hand, you are as hurt by screwed up family members as anyone else. Okay, you are as emotionally hurt and messed up by that and get PTSD just as easily as anyone else. At the same time, if they're having a rough time, you are strangely, you don't know why, but you're strangely drawn to the ones who are messed up because, and you get fed. So there's this weird double thing going on. That right there can teach a person certain bad emotional habits that it takes a long time to break out of, a long time and a lot of conscious work to break out of. So I'm just going to say that right there, that's hard. It is not easy to be a child vampire. Really not easy. And I don't think it makes you a psychopath. I mean, I'm not a psychopath. The other vampires I know are not psychopaths, but we have some issues. And that's something that we need to, we do a lot of work to work through so that we don't spew it on people. And it's difficult because if you have a 3-year-old who is drawn to someone who's angry or in pain or afraid and they don't know why, I mean, and 3-year-olds, ethics and 3-year-olds, you got to really be on them all the time because they don't really understand. My daughter is not an inherently bad person, but when she was 3, and when the kid's that old, 3 or 4, you're constantly like, don't do that, no, you can't do that either, no, you can't, stop that. I found her with one of her little friends and she had shut her little friend in the toy box and was sitting on top of it. The little friend was crying in the toy box and she was sitting there smiling and feeding. And I'm like, that is not okay. Not okay. And it's not that she's a psychopath. It's that she, at a very young age, was getting this sort of double, these secondary rewards. And it's like, okay, we're going to make this very clear. This is super not okay. I know it tastes good, but it's super not okay. And so if a kid who doesn't get that, doesn't have a parent who walks in and says, I know what you're doing, stop that. We're going to find better ways for you to be fed. She certainly doesn't do that now. Now she has her own family, her own cluster of people around her chosen family that she works on. So I think there are some difficult issues. I don't think it's psychopathy. I think it's kind of an unconscious desperation, because what do you do when you don't even know what's going on? But if you don't find people to be around like this, you get sick. What do you do? One of the most successful psychic vampires that I know is a psychiatrist, and he's the one who takes the really messed up patients. He will take the schizophrenics. He will take the psychopaths. He will take all the ones who have like all the ones who just like need to sit under his desk and cry, the ones who like scream and yell and all the rest of it. And he takes them all. He takes all the ones that the other shrinks won't take. And he just sort of sits there and is calm with them, and he does help them, and he pulls all that off them, and they leave better. They leave feeling better. That's a good example of what a primary vampire can do that is actually helpful. So anyway, is there anything here
I want to close off that thought there by thanking you for clarifying that, because my interest in psychopathy was actually stirred by my interest in studying the minds of the people who are ruining this world, the Elon Musks and the Zuckerbergs, and the guy that runs Nestle, who publicly wrote in a corporate document he doesn't care that they use child slaves. And I wondered how many of these people are psychopaths or how many of them are just hopelessly screwed up in some other way. And that gave me a good perspective on it. So I can now look at that picture with a little more clarity.
Yeah, most of the unpleasant psychic vampires. I'm sure there are some. I'm sure there are some who are cult leaders. Being a cult leader is like a prime for an unethical psychic vampire. In fact, if I was unethical, I would be a cult leader. That's what I would do, because you can get fed so much from adoring people. But there probably are a small percentage. Oh, sure. I'm sure they're out there, but there's probably a lot of such people who are also just messed up, so you can't jump to conclusions. You have to observe. One thing that is different about the auras of secondary vampires are just like everybody, are no different really than everybody else. Primary vampires have a very specific aura, and this has been checked with a lot of primary vampires. We're like, oh, okay, because we can tell when another one of us walks into the room, there's like a second of territoriality that we have to kind of crush. Like, oh, shields up. But our auras are full of tentacles, full of very fine tentacles, and we're really good shapeshifters on an energetic level, because we can wrap those tentacles and shape them in all kinds of different ways, which means as a shaman, I'm a very good shapeshifter, which is very useful. But those tentacles, they go out. If you see someone whose aura is full of tentacles, they may have, lots of, millions of tiny tentacles. They may have no idea. No, the likelihood is, the 99% likelihood is they have no idea, because what percentage of people know what their aura looks like or is shaped like? Most have no clue. But if you do, that's a psychic vampire. Also, if you know how to shield, and by the way, if you are on the show and you don't know how to shield, shame on you. Learn how to shield, learn how to ground center and shield. Okay. I think it should be taught to everybody in kindergarten, ground center shield. If you are not sure whether someone is an actual psychic vampire or is simply an annoying human being, an exhausting person, all you have to do is throw up a shield. And if they either A, immediately become disinterested in talking to you and wander away, or if that's the case, maybe they were a psychic vampire, maybe. But a psychic vampire, if they're trying to feed off you and you just throw up a shield, that stops them. And then and on some level, even if they're unconscious, they'll be like, there's no food here, leaving. There's nothing here for me, leaving. But if they keep going on and on and on at you, they're not a psychic vampire, they're just exhausting. So all you have to do is shield. There are a very few master vampires who could probably drill your shields. They are extremely rare. Extraordinarily rare. Most psychic vampires just throw it up, cover yourself in a nice shield, and sit there and nod and smile, and they will wander on to new prey. They will be like, suddenly just lose interest in you. Like, okay, never mind. And it may even be on an unconscious level. They'll just be like, the food's gone, I'm going elsewhere.
Well, you said anger, fear, and pain.
Yes.
I was wondering if the pain of depression is one of the ones that you can eat.
I can, although it's not as tasty. But the thing with depression, okay, there's a difference between depression and grief. Like situational stuff like grief is much better, is much easier for me to take and much better tasting. Chemical depression, the problem with chemical depression, it's like a constant trickle. Like I could drink and drink and drink and drink, and they'll just make more, and it just fills up again as fast as it comes out. And so it's like I never really give anybody that much relief, more than temporary relief with it, because it just keeps coming and coming and coming and coming. I take it and it goes, and I can only take so much life force. I mean, the life force is a carrier for emotion. And if I'm taking specific flavors of life force, I'm sort of mainlining in and going, okay, this is the stuff that I see. It lights up. This is the life force. This is the part that I want. But I can only take so much. You don't want to deplete someone. That's why I won't feed off of children or pregnant women, this sort of thing, or anyone who has got a really bad chronic illness of the can't afford to lose any energy sort of thing. I'm not going to do that. If they need my services, the way I work it is I have somebody who does Reiki or something like that be in front of them, and I stand behind them with my hands on their shoulders, and I pull out and the other person pours in at the same time. So we do a two-way fill so that they don't run down. In fact, sometimes I'll do that anyway with if I have somebody else who can push in with good positive energy. But like chemical depression is a hard one because their brain and it spills from their brain into their soul very quickly, and it just keeps making more. It just fills up as fast as I could drain someone dry, and their last 3 drops would still be depressed. It's like it doesn't. I wish that I could fix that, but it's too endemic in the system. I think because it's brain chemistry, I cannot fix schizophrenia either. I can maybe, if someone's frightened, I can take away a panic attack, but they're still crazy.
I'm sorry, I was just thinking of how horrible it would be for you to be at a haunted house, and then you take away everybody's fear. They just like, hey, that was not a good haunted house.
Well, first of all, it's a consent thing. I don't take from people, with a couple of exceptions. There was at least if it's an emergency situation, sometimes I will do it. An example of emergency situation: my daughter, when she was a teenager, and I were both sitting at a row of cars at a train station. And we were waiting for a friend to come in on the train, and the train station was in a nasty, bad area of town. And 2 drunks, started a broken bottle fight, just like right there in the parking lot in front of all the cars. You could hear all the car locks clicking down, and they were staggering around, waving broken bottles at each other, hitting each other, and, cutting each other up. And we're like, shit. And we were really worried that something was going to happen. The train was going to pull up and all the people were going to disgorge into the middle of this fight, And so I said to my daughter, I think we need to do something about this. And the 2 of us both focused on pulling their anger out. So we both went right in to them and pulled it out. And I train people to focus use their breath. Breath is the tool you use to move chi around your body, to move chi, mana, prana, on whatever you want to call it, around your body. So we were sucking it out of them, and after about 2 minutes of that, they both kind of like lost their will to fight, and just sort of went like, and turned around and wandered off and staggered off in opposite directions. I was like, phew. So that is the circumstances under which I will non-consensually feed, is that someone is being a real problem. I've also done it once at a concert when somebody was having such a bad trip that they were absolutely freaking out and they were becoming dangerous. I have done that. If someone is a danger to other people because and it has lost control, then I'll take what I can just to make the situation safe. But that's got to be a really serious emergency. It can't be just that I don't like that person, or I'm upset with that person, or that person is being emotionally annoying or something like that. It's got to be like, this is not safe. So, and there's no time to do anything else. There's no time and there's no way for anything else to work. But aside from that, it's consent. I think it's really important to do informed consent. And by informed, I mean, if the person doesn't believe it, that's okay. But at least you told them and you asked and you said, this is what when I am sexual with anyone, or I do any kind of, for example, BDSM play with anyone, I will tell them up front. So I'm a psychic vampire and I will be doing this. If you don't like the idea, tell me now and we won't do this. I will not touch you. I will respect your limits. But if you climb in bed with me, there will be feeding. Are you okay with that? And if they say, oh yeah, whatever, it's nonsense, sure, whatever, I don't believe any of this, it's still informed consent. And if they feel something in the middle of it that otherwise would be like, that feels really weird, then at least they have something in their head, like maybe that's that thing that he was telling me. Maybe that's that. And they have something to hang it on, because feeling something energetically weird and having nothing to hang it on is crazy making. And I won't do that to people. So let's see. Anything else? And did I miss any other questions. Oh, someone asked about parenting. Yes. Example of the healthy ways you were able to teach your child to manage that need. Yes. I taught her to first be aware of her energy, which is the same as if you had a kid who is hypoglycemic or diabetic. You would teach them to be aware of when they needed to eat, right? You'd say, be real careful, not just when you're starving, but when you start to get hungry, be aware of what low blood sugar feels like, that kind of thing. And you teach them that. So first I taught her awareness of, are you hungry? Are you starting to get hungry? Before you get super hungry, you want to do something about this before you get super hungry. And then I taught her to come and ask, and she had the adults in her family, and I said, you can't feed on the pets. Come to the adults in the family and ask, and say, I'm hungry, can I sit in your lap? I'm hungry, can you snuggle with me for a minute? That kind of thing. So I had her ask, and then I taught her to respect when people would say, that's enough. And I taught her how to stop. I also, feeding on the pets, mostly the pets leave. Pets can remove their consent. I don't know that maybe hamsters or guinea pigs can, but cats and dogs, a cat can absolutely say no. When a cat does not want to be touched anymore, the cat lets you know very, very clearly that it does not want to be done. They leave. They're like, out of here. No, enough of this. I'm done. Very friendly dogs will sometimes let you feed a bit, but then they'll be like, okay, I'm done. And they'll get uncomfortable and they'll leave. I think animals, so it was safety, but it was also courtesy. It was also awareness. And I also I talked to her about it, and I let her see me working on people who had problems. Someone who would come, someone's having a panic attack. Okay, we can fix this. Let's, okay, watch me. I would say, watch me do this. Watch me what I'm doing. See the light. Or I had friends who have physical pain. I can't cure them. I'm not a healer, but I can temporarily take down pain. And I see pain points in the body as lights, like lit up areas. To me, pain points are lit up. We used to kid about how I have like the stupidest superpower ever, because I will like on an unconscious level know exactly where your body is hurting the worst. And if I'm not careful, I'm not a touchy person or a hugger anyway, but if I'm not careful, I will, you've got a fresh tattoo under that sleeve, I will smack your arm. I will know that it's there. And that, I thought that was like the stupid, if somebody's got a bruise in their inner thigh, I will hug them and my knee will just go there. It was the only time I remember I really wanted to hold my friend's hand when we visited him in the hospital, and I'm not a hand holder, and he had a really painful IV in that hand, this sort of thing. But that's actually very useful for pulling pain out. It's like, oh, I can see where you're hurting. I can see that it's lit up there. So that's where I want to pull. I want to take that pain out. So I would say, okay, so so-and-so has some pain in their leg here. Can you see it? See where her knee is hurting? Okay, now I'm gonna put my hands on it and I'm gonna pull that out. I'm gonna breathe and I'm gonna pull that out. And it doesn't cure it, doesn't fix it. It's temporary relief, but an aspirin is an aspirin, and there's no side effects except feeling a little dizzy, and you eat well, and then you eat, you ground, you're fine, that kind of thing. But so that is something that I do. I've actually had a really I've found a very useful treatment for people with fibro, which is I see the nerves as tangles and bright points, all the tangled up nerves, and I'll use my tentacles to comb them out, just to comb them through and straighten them out, and then I'll go into the bright points and just pull out. And again, it's maybe lasts 12 hours, but that's 12 hours that they're not hurting. That's something useful that can be done. And I do work, I work with a lot of different gods, and one of them that I work with a cluster of healing goddesses. And the main one that I work with said to me, this is not, your stupid superpower is not a problem. It's a tool. Use it to see where people are hurting. Tune into it. Notice where they're hurting, and you can take that. Well, if they consent, you can take that away. It's not just the anger, fear, and pain. It's physical pain too. And sometimes there's so much of it and it just keeps coming back, like the depression, like the nerves just keep making more and more and more. If it's really bad, I can't fix everything, but I can take the edge off. And it's really, it's low side effect in that sense. So I know people have been talking about stuff. How do anger and fear taste differently? I don't know how to. Okay, so our poor meat brains, when they get psychic input, they try their best to line it up with senses, to line it up with physical experiences, and that's, each brain is kind of scrambling to figure out what do I hook this up with, what do I do with this, how do I interpret this. And so it's going to be different for everyone. Everyone's gonna feel that differently. Fear is super delicious. For me, fear is like the nicest. I don't know why, but it's really sweet. It tastes really sweet to me. I have synesthesia actually, so I see music as colors and things like that. There's all kinds of stuff there. So I do smell and taste psychic input. It does come through as smells and tastes for me, as well as seeing stuff. So it kind of smells and tastes sweet. Anger is more hot and spicy in that way. Pain is kind of like booze, it's got that alcohol feel, that strong alcohol feel to it. So someone says anger feels like sticky gross gelatin to me. That's fine. But if you're not me, if for you don't have the inborn wiring for that to be nice. I mean, my daughter referred to the nicotine fits that she of the friends that she ate as it was like melted cheese. It was sticky, but it was like melted cheese, and I just pulled that out. It was like eating cheese. So I think every brain is going to take it in differently, and I find that when you're talking to people about their psychic input, they all see things differently anyway, feel things differently. The same thing is going to show up different to different people.
Have you ever considered writing a novel about a psychic vampire? Because this would be brilliant, I think, but I don't know if you have time. I know you write fiction sometimes, but that would be such a cool book. A character that reacts like this. Wow.
Yeah. That's a thought. It's a thought. I mean, mostly the gods have me busy, have all my writing streams tied up writing nonfiction, writing helpful nonfiction to help people. But I will think about that. That's
just tell the gods that fiction is sometimes the best way to reach the audience that isn't looking for help.
Yeah.
But I think that would be brilliant. But anyway.
And someone says pulling out the pain. Some of us tried to do that to a dying friend in the hospital, but he fought us clinging to the pain. That's why you have to have consent. You really have to have consent. If the person was unconscious, I would ask my gods. Is it okay to do this? I would ask my goddess, who's the death goddess. If someone was close to death, I mean, I've helped people die. I'm going to say that right out here, that I have people have asked me to help them with that, and I have helped them with that. This is certainly not something I would not do without absolute consent, but I've done that for someone who was dying and wanted it to go faster. But I cleared that with my goddess. That was I don't know, I am unclear on, I'm not talking about the ethics of this, the human ethics of the situation. I'm talking about the spiritual rightness of the situation. Is this in balance with the universe? Is this in balance with all that is, with what is supposed to happen? Is this karmically correct? I don't know. Sometimes I can tell that, sometimes I can feel that, but sometimes I'm not 100% sure, and I am a fallible mortal. So I ask, is this the right thing to do? Is this the cosmically right thing to do right now? So if it was someone who was unconscious and it was like, I can help this I can help them move on, or I can just at least take the pain away. Should I do that, lady? And you know, I work for Hella, so she's gonna have the answer right there. You know, she's either gonna be keep your fucking paws off them. Okay, got it. Paws off. You know, and sometimes I have been told, because I've specifically asked if I shouldn't be touching someone, even if they say yes, even if they come to me and say yes, if I'm not supposed to feed, stop me, please. Because people can say yes to things that might hurt them or that might not be right for them. People, just because someone consents, it's like the spirits also need to consent. And I want that guard on me. I want that check just to let me know. So actually, no, not this one, not this one. Okay. And, you know, maybe there's something wrong. Sometimes I will feed if that person has a lot of PTSD from being violated in some way. Sometimes when I feed, it will trigger that. And even if they said, yes, yes, I give you permission, that if they've got a particular PTSD pattern, it might trigger them and they will react very like angrily and violently. And I'll be like, whoa, you know, and I don't want to trigger them. I don't want to make them unhappy. I don't want to cause them a flashback. And I don't want the kind of reaction that they're then going to spew at me or may spew at me. And so in some cases, it's like, okay, sometimes what I'll do is I'll just start out with like one tentacle. How does that feel? I'm not pulling, but how does that feel? Okay, that feels icky and gross. Okay, we're not doing this. And I always say to them, because say this was any energy work, I will say, if anything I do makes you feel weird and creepy, you say stop and I will stop. And sometimes if I think they're the kind of person who isn't very good at setting boundaries, I will make them actually physically say stop. So say stop for me so that I know I'm going to put something in and you're going to say stop so I can see you do it. And then I will pull back. It's like we have to be motored through boundaries, because it is super, super important that I not violate anyone in doing this work, because then I make it bad for like any future psychic vampire they run across. You know, they're going to associate that. I've also something that y'all that I discovered kind of offhandedly by watching and was like, oh, I didn't know this existed. People who have a lot of strong energy sensing talent, right? People with a lot of psychic talent. And sometimes if they have bad experiences in their life, they can get a kind of psychic PSD, in the sense that they can have psychic flashbacks, where, you know how you have like a flashback in your, if you have PTSD, perhaps you don't know, but if you do have PTSD, you get physical flashbacks in your body from physical things that have happened. You can get, if something happened to your aura, happened to you psychically, you can have energetic flashbacks, like it'll like replay itself in the energy of your aura, and whatever it is not there anymore. You're just replaying that. And that happened in front of me with a friend who was on the phone in a heavily, heavily shielded place. There was no psychic anything getting through. And an annoying person was on the phone with them. Okay. And I was watching them, and it looked like psychic vampire tentacles were coming up in their own aura and attaching to them and then falling away. And they got off and were like, oh no, I think she fed on me. And I said, no, she didn't. She was on the other end of a phone, and you're in a heavily shielded area. Nobody is here but you and me. Nobody is here but you and me. That was you doing it to yourself, because that was a flashback that you had because somebody did that to you non-consensually in the past. Who in your life was one of had these characteristics? And she was like, oh, the ex-husband. And I was like, okay, so that wasn't the girl on the phone who is merely annoying and needy. That was an energetic flashback to your ex-husband, who isn't here either. But you see, someone who has something like that, I don't want to trigger them. And I don't know. It's hard for me to tell. I could do divination on the matter. I've done that sometimes. But that's really the same as asking the gods. Anyway, and mostly I'll just ask, is it safe? Is it safe for me to do this? stop me now. And that's how I manage to ideally not hurt people in that way. Oh, are we at the end?
Yeah, this has been insanely wonderful, but time for the last questions if there are any.
Any final, this shit is weird?
Looking for hands. No.
Okay, a lot of this, not all of
Yeah.
it. Oh, sure, go ahead.
Oh, there's one. Joe?
Well, I had
oh, over.
which one?
Joe, we'll
You.
start with Joe.
Okay, real quick. I had a girlfriend a long time ago. There were three of us that would hang out together. And two of us finally stopped meeting with the third one because every time we get together for lunch, you know, we'd come in and we'd be happy, and then she would show up all down, and we'd spend lunch and we'd talk, and she'd leave all bubbly and we'd be down.
Oops.
You know, and we finally said, we ain't doing this anymore. But after I quit interacting with her, we still live in the same town and we still know the same group of people. Every time I do something that I would call like level up, because I was doing my witchcraft studies and stuff, she would try and contact me. So the question is, you know, I don't know. I got the impression she was unconsciously doing what she was doing.
Probably,
right. She was,
whether it was psychic or otherwise, it was unconscious on her part. You know,
yeah.
It could have been merely emotional. You know, she was a downer, and she needed to vent, and she vented, and you allowed her to vent, but you also kind of, you know, so it could have been emotional. It could have been psychic. The thing is, if you run into her again, shield. See if she's still interested. Put up really good shields. Be nice, but put up really thick shields.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I have
and
no
even interested in interacting with you. She might not be.
That would be something to think of. Yeah. And
Also,
because we were friends, I didn't think right away about throwing up a shield.
Right, of course.
Which would have answered my question.
Most people you don't. Also, just if you can sense her aura, you know, see if it's full of little threads reaching out.
Okay. Yeah, because I know she has trauma in her past.
Yeah.
So she's got a bunch of that stuff. My question mainly was because we probably still had some kind of a connection. She could sense that I had enough energy to be able to go get. Is that even from a distance? Does that happen?
Maybe it would depend on what kind of a connection. You'd need to have somebody look and see if there was still a thread attached between you, or if you going somewhere else. That's a whole other thing. And
okay,
like that can be cut, they can be tied, they can be. There's all sorts of. That's like a whole other thing. But
and they can, yeah. Go ahead.
Was there one other?
Jane's next.
Jane, yeah.
Yeah, I have a feeling that you would be wonderful in training death doulas because you know where it's at. Have you thought of that? Over.
I hadn't actually. I mean, I have been a death doula. We didn't call it that. It was before we had fancy names for them. But it's you know, I've occasionally sort of looked in that direction kind of thing because I mean, I'm a Hell's man. It would be that is like right on power work, but it's a thought. It's a thought. I am on a slightly different note. I am a ghost hunter. In that, and I'm really good at removing the ghosts that the clairvoyants can't talk out of there, can't convince to leave. If they need to be forcibly removed, I can go in and do that because a ghost is a soul and a bunch of life force, often life force they've stolen from other people, from living people, and I can just pull their life force out and they get sucked in by the gravity of the death well, you know, like that. So that is something I do a lot of clearing hauntings and clearing ghosts and stuff like that. And so I've worked with people on both sides of that line, both the dying and the already dead and need to move on. Thank you, please.
I hope you're going to be at Changing Times, Changing Worlds. I'm really looking forward to hearing to what you have to say. I'll be there too. And there's going to be the ghost hunters. And if there's something malign, I hope that you'll be on deck to deal with them. Over.
There is, by the way, there is a ghost in that. There's at least one ghost in that hotel. I do not bother it. It tends to hang around the piano. At least it did last time. I don't bother it because it seems pretty. It doesn't bother people. It's just kind of wandering.
So it's just enjoying life.
It's just being there, you know. And it's one of those. If it wasn't my place, I didn't get the feeling that it was my job. That's something else I check. I check with the powers that be. Is this my job to remove or is it not? I don't like the whole, oh, we're gonna hunt ghosts so we can like have a stupid show, or we're gonna attempt to, it's for entertainment purposes. It's like, no, this is a serious situation. Some of these entities are in pain. What the fuck? You don't, forgive my language, but it's like, this is not, using them as entertainment is not okay. I don't like that. But of course, I'm a very opinionated Hells man. I work for Death Gods, and I'm just like, leave them in peace. You know, if they need to be moved on, they can be moved on, but they're not there to provide you with entertainment. So I tend to get into it. I usually keep my mouth shut around ghost hunters because and most of them can't see the ghosts and wouldn't know they were there anyway. And they're there with their stupid equipment. And I'm like, you want me to find them? I can find them.
Well,
anyway.
If there are friendly ghosts that, you know, are just enjoying seeing us around and having fun, laughing at the ghost hunters, then yeah, standing back. Yes.
But
over.
we do have to end as much, no matter how much fun we're having. Thank you, Raven. This was even better than
Thank you,
I
Raven.
hoped.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
One of them.
And